You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and this week we have a really special guest with us. We were trying to think what is the most appropriate way to introduce our guest, who is, by the way, Kent Sanders. I'm going to tell you about him in just a second, but should we call him the man of the hour, or should we call him the man of the day, or even the man of the century? But we decided he is the man of the millennium. Kent Sanders. So remember that if you ever have the opportunity to interact with him. But obviously, you could tell by my joking around that Kent is actually a very good friend of mine, someone I've known for several years, someone I have an immense amount of respect for, just a really, really solid guy. But let me tell you a little bit about him. And that way, when he opens up his mic and starts talking, I will have sufficiently embarrassed him. But Kent Sanders is the founder of Inkwell Ghostwriting, which helps leaders grow their business through books and other content. He's also the author and co-author of numerous books, including 18 Words to Live By, A Father's Wisdom on What Matters Most. That just came out earlier this year. But his most recent book, and let me just hold it up for those of you that are watching via video. I've got it right here in front of me. His most recent book that he co-wrote with Billy Stanley, Elvis Presley's stepbrother, is a book called The Faith of Elvis, and it chronicles Elvis's spiritual faith and his growth and the investment that he made in his brothers. It's a fantastic book, and I hope that you'll check it out. And Kent does a whole bunch of other things, including he has a membership community, the Daily Writer membership community. He also is a podcast host. He does a whole bunch of things. Kent, you've got a lot going on, which makes you someone who fits really well with our audience and those of us here on the live call, because I think a lot of us on the call here have a lot going on. But anyway, welcome to one of the most thoughtful people you will ever meet, Kent Sanders.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to be here, John. I appreciate the invitation.
Did we sufficiently embarrass you with that long, gushing introduction?
Well, I could lie and say yes. Secretly, I actually really liked it, but I feel like coming from kind of a Christian background and a ministry background and being a teacher, I have to say, oh my goodness, John, you really embarrassed me. You shouldn't say those nice things. But secretly, I kind of liked it.
You secretly kind of liked it. All right. So then you've just laid down the challenge, which means by the end of this interview, I have to figure out what else can I do to embarrass the guest. Actually, I'm not going to do that at all. I'm just glad that you're able to be with us, because I think you have a really cool story to share and lots of great experience and wisdom that I hope our group benefits from, but I also know our listeners are going to benefit from it as well. And for starters, I wonder if you just please tell us about your story. And what I mean by that is this: I'd love to hear about the progress that your career took, because it's a really interesting progression where you went from serving in traditional occupations. I know a couple about, I know about a couple of the roles that you have served in. But I'd also like to hear how you went from those roles to how you earn a living now and how you serve people now. So can you take us on that long arc of your story and how it all worked together?
Sure. Well, there were a lot of bumps and bruises, a lot of mistakes along the way, but I'll give you kind of the truncated version, so to speak. But I'll try not to leave out any fun details, if that
Okay.
makes sense. So I started out as actually a worship pastor in my 20s. I never considered doing anything different with my life. I always, from the time I was a kid, I always wanted to be a pastor and never for a moment thought I would do anything else. So that's what I went to college to do. I went to a small ministry training college in North St. Louis, a school called St. Louis Christian College. They actually just merged with another sister college a few months ago. So I went there to become a pastor. The only kind of pastor that I knew how to be when I was a kid was a preacher, because I grew up in a small church in southern Missouri. So the only model I had was just being a preacher. I wasn't, have to be honest with you, I wasn't super excited about that because I didn't think I was really good at that. I was more of a kid who was into the arts and music and theater and drama and all that kind of stuff. However, I really felt a call in my life to go do that. So that's what I did. After college, though, I was a worship pastor for 7 or 8 years at a church in northern Illinois. And once I had been there for about 7 years, I really got the urge to have some interns. So one summer I had a couple of interns. One of those interns was actually somebody from our church. and she was kind of training under me to do worship ministry stuff. And we had somebody from another local college come in and do a summer internship as well. And I found that I really, really enjoyed teaching and training and helping raise up people to be worship pastors. And around the same time, I also had the opportunity to then go back to the same college to teach full time and to kind of rework our worship and music program. So that's what I did. Basically, I kind of overlapped teaching with my worship ministry role for about a year.
Hmm.
And as I look back, that's a theme that's really occurred over and over and over again, is taking whatever I'm doing, but then overlapping that with kind of the next thing that I'm doing. Because I think many times we think you have to be in a role and then you have this abrupt stop and then you do this hard right turn into something else. For me, it's never really worked that way. The things that I'm doing and the things that I shift into have always kind of overlapped with the things that I'm was doing, and then I make kind of a gradual shift if all that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a worship professor for about 10 years. I was running our music program, overseeing our adjuncts who taught piano, voice. I taught guitar and taught some ministry and theology courses. And I also ran our chapel services twice a week. And after about really 20 years of doing music in the church, and then, I'm sorry, 10 years of doing music in the church, including my high school years and
Mm-hmm.
college years, and then running our chapel services and doing that at the college level, I was really, really burned out. And for me, it was like one day somebody just walked in and flipped a light switch off. And that's really the honest truth. Is I walked into work one day and I just, how do you have those moments sometime in life where you have this abrupt shift and you think, I don't really want to do this anymore. And the excitement for what you're doing just leaves instantaneously. It was really like that for me.
Hmm.
So I knew that I either had to leave my teaching job or shift into something else, or something had to change because it wasn't right for me to continue being a professor in that area. It wasn't right for that because my students would suffer. They deserve to have a professor over that area who was really excited about that. So I was really fortunate because my college let me, over a couple of years, shift into more of a role where I was teaching things like writing, communications, storytelling, film, arts, those kinds of things. And they actually ended up hiring somebody to take my place, overseeing all the music and worship stuff at our school. And I found that I really, really liked all of the communication stuff that was really in line with the things that I was doing on the side, like podcasting and writing. And I was just having a blast. However, something happened in 2015 that that really kind of shook my foundations, and that was we had a huge blow up at our school. We
Hmm.
had several faculty members who were in conflict with each other, with our administration. There were a couple local churches involved in some issues, and how sometimes in a small organization, people avoid conflict and problems fester for years or for even
Mm-hmm.
decades. Then all of a sudden, they all come to a head and they blow up all at once. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what happened. So actually, I had several of my good friends who were teachers. They all left or were released from their contracts around the same time, and it was a huge blow up in our kind of brotherhood of churches in our school. And it was such a negative and horrible time that I vowed to myself, number one, that I was going to start figuring out what my next steps would be. Number two, I vowed to myself that if I ever left that role, that I would do it on my own terms and in my own way.
Hmm.
Because I was seeing a lot of people leave their ministry there at our Christian college in a bad way. And you can kind of start a job or a ministry in a way that's a little bit shaky, or maybe you're trying to figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
But if you leave in a bad way and on bad terms with people, they will never ever forget that. Doesn't matter what happens. You're
Mm-hmm.
always going to leave a bad taste in their mouth. And I saw that happen to a lot of people, and I did not want that to happen to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So around that same time, I started doing podcasting. I started doing some writing for clients, like podcast show notes. That was actually my very first writing gig for a client. And over a few years, that just kind of built up and built up. And then one day I got to know a guy named Nick Pavlidis, who was a ghostwriter who used to be an attorney. And he was getting ready to launch this thing called Ghostwriter School. He hadn't launched it yet. And he he was kind of hesitant because he didn't have everything quite ready to launch. And I said, Nick,
Hmm.
I really want to get into ghostwriting. I think this would be a great career move for me. Would you open up this course for me? And I was actually his first student. And that's really how I got into ghostwriting is I took the course, I stopped over analyzing things, I put into action the things he was teaching, and then it kind of built from there. Now, if it's okay, let me take like 60 seconds. Can I
Please.
describe to you how I actually chose ghostwriting? Because that's a question a lot of people ask me. I'm going
Yeah,
to take
go
that as
ahead.
a yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I actually, in that period between 2015 and last year, 2021, when I actually left my college teaching job to do ghostwriting full time, it was not a linear progression. I made a lot of mistakes. So for years, in fact, for our whole marriage, my wife kept telling me, Kent, you got to focus on writing. That is your main thing. Just focus on writing. Well, being a stubborn guy, I never really listened to her that much, even though I kind of secretly knew she was right. I didn't think I could actually make a career out of writing. I knew that it was possible, but I didn't think it was possible for me.
Hmm.
So all the while I was doing this side hustle on the side with podcasting and I had some client work and everything, it really wasn't generating that much income. So I kind of secretly thought I've got to have a second side hustle to really make money so I can leave my college job because our college is going to crash at some point. It's going to close. And in fact, it eventually did. So I tried things like network marketing, which was a complete disaster. I lost a few $1,000s on that. You know, I bought all the products, tried to sell them, and it was just a complete and utter failure. And one summer, I literally, I'm not kidding, I spent my whole summer trying to sell stuff on Amazon,
Okay.
starting with hundreds and hundreds of my own books. It was a complete failure. I
And
ended up,
this isn't a terribly long time ago.
no, this is just that this was 20, the Amazon thing I think was 2015.
Okay. So that's, I mean,
This
that's
is
not a
just
long
years
time
ago.
ago.
Like
Yeah.
this is not ancient history for
Right.
me.
Exactly. All right. Continue.
So the irony of the Amazon thing. Now I realize there are people who do very well on Amazon,
Hmm.
and good for them, but I was not one of them. The irony of the Amazon thing was that I literally shipped, I think, 1,200 of my own books to Amazon. I spent a whole summer learning fulfillment by Amazon, how to ship things, buying all the supplies, yada yada. And some of those actually sold. In fact, the books that sold the best were the Greek and Hebrew resources, biblical
Okay.
languages,
Hmm.
ironically. But a lot of stuff didn't sell. And so I ended up having to pay Amazon to destroy the bulk of my books because they weren't selling. Because I either had to pay Amazon to keep storing them, or I had to, pay to have them shipped back to me or pay to have them destroyed. And paying to have them destroyed was actually the cheapest option.
Oh,
Weirdly enough, it was like a big book burning party, apparently,
wow.
or something. So I had a lot of failures like that. And literally, this is what happened. One summer, I applied for, in fact, this was 2019. I applied for 3 or 4 different jobs in that involved something related to marketing and education for different, like marketing companies, digital kinds of companies, companies that were doing things in the digital space that needed somebody to help with curriculum or educational components of what they were doing.
Hmm.
And it was the kind of jobs that required you to go through this long assessment where you write all this stuff and you go through all these hoops that take just dozens of hours. And I applied for several of those. I got none of those.
Mm.
And for me, the thing that really sealed the deal was there was this one company that I did about 60 hours of work for, putting together this proposal for a consulting project that involved self-publishing and a curriculum, a bunch podcasting, and a bunch of other stuff, and sent it off, and they declined it immediately. And I was absolutely crushed. And I sat down right at this desk where I'm sitting right now in my home office. And this is one afternoon I was so angry and discouraged, and I felt like a complete loser because I couldn't figure out how to transition to something else. I could see that my college career was not going anywhere,
Mm.
but yet all these things that I were trying seemed to be failing. So I sat down and I got out a legal pad, and I thought, what if I approach this in the opposite way? What if instead of just trying to throw spaghetti on the wall or throw darts on the wall and see what sticks, what if I start with myself and what kind of career I actually want to create for myself?
Mm.
What are the criteria that I want to have in a career that I want to build?
And
So I
I'm going to
boiled it
pause you
down to,
right there. I
go ahead.
hold on one second because please notice that those of you live on the call, and those of you that are listening to this right now, asking that question, what kind of career do I want to have? Not just waiting for things to show up or for somebody else to kind of tell you what the answer to that question is. But here you have Kent in a moment of desperation saying, all right, I want to figure this
Mhm.
out. So, all right, pick up from there.
So what I did is I made a list on a legal pad of what are the qualities of my ideal business. If I was going to create something, if I was going to transition to some kind of job or role, what are the qualities that for me were non-negotiable? Now, I'm a pretty flexible guy. I can deal with a lot of different things, but I boiled it down to a list of 5 things, and these were very, very simple, but very important things. So, number one was that it had to have time freedom. So, I had to
Hmm.
be able to do whatever the job I was going to have, do it on my own schedule. Number two, it had to have location freedom.
Hmm.
So, I needed to be able to do it from anywhere, from the beach. I honestly, I don't like the beach. I think the beach is hot and dirty, but that's just me. I could do it from the woods or from a cabin or from Starbucks. Number three, there had to be no limit on the income that I could create for myself.
Hmm. So
I
no
didn't
upper
want some
limit.
administrator or some academic dean or somebody saying yet again, oh, there's not going to be any raises this year. I got
Hmm.
so frustrated with hearing that year after year in higher education.
Right.
Number four was that it had to focus on my main skill that was marketable, and that's writing. Now I have a range of skills like everybody does, but my main marketable skill is writing and crafting content. The number four, I had to have some kind of a business or a job that was going to put me in the orbit of financially successful business people
Hmm.
because I wanted to learn from those people and I wanted to figure out from them what I needed to change in my own life to become more financially successful and financially stable.
Hmm.
And I knew that job had to put me in their orbit, whatever that would be. So I made that list, and as I thought through all the possible directions that I could go, there were only 2 things that fit all those criteria. One was ghostwriting, and one was copywriting. And
Hmm.
the reason that I picked ghostwriting was because, well, really, there were 2 or 3 reasons. One reason was that I thought that was easier to explain to potential clients. Because when people ask me, what do you do? And I say I'm a ghostwriter, they always 100% of the time they go, what's a ghostwriter? Or oh, I've heard of that. What does that entail? Or is that some secretive thing? It always, the term that I have for what I do kind of brings up curiosity in conversations automatically, which I think is kind of cool.
Hmm.
But it's also very easy for me to explain that what a ghostwriter does is we write books for people who are too busy or they don't have the time or the talent or the inclination to want to write books for themselves. So we write books that give them more of what they want in life, whether that's more financial success, business growth, they want to tell their story, leave a legacy, whatever it is. That to me was way easier to explain than copywriting. Now, copywriting is very important, but most people don't really understand what it is, and
Hmm.
it's hard to explain to a non-copywriter what it is and why it's valuable. Plus, copywriting can go a whole bunch of different directions. So can ghostwriting. Except books are a pretty repeatable process. Once you've written a few books, really a nonfiction book structure, there's really only a few ways you can do it, and it's very very repeatable. So I thought, well, if I can do that, and I can also get paid, potentially get paid well per project, and it's an easy to explain business, I can do it on my own time.
Hmm.
That to me was kind of a win. So that's the direction that I went, and that's literally how I decided to get into ghostwriting.
That's awesome. So you went from working in a very traditional context, being
Mm-hmm.
disappointed each year with the limits of the budget toward your financial independence and all sorts of things, to now basically inventing your own career and saying, all right, this is what I want to be paid. So draw the contrast for us. Life before ghostwriting and life after. What does it look like?
Life before was I commuted 30 minutes one way to North St. Louis, which actually I enjoyed, and that's a part of my job that I miss, the
Hmm.
commute. I listened to podcasts, I listened to music, I would, decompress on my way home, those kind of things. I would go and I would have a schedule that somebody else had created for me, a class schedule. I would sit in my office uh, in a space that, at our college, in a space where there were each year less and less students and less staff. It
Mm.
became kind of a ghost town. So I began to notice this, and this was like a real visceral thing, and I didn't just imagine it, because I noticed the last couple of years that I worked there that as I would start to drive to Florissant in North St. Louis, where our college was, I would start to have this sort of emotional cloud descend over me. I
Mm.
know that sounds like I'm making that up, but it's really the truth.
Hmm.
And when I would be there at the school, I would just feel this sort of kind of a sadness, just a little bit of depression, like, oh, this is kind of like the place is going downhill. There's nobody here anymore. I sort of feel like a failure still working here, blah, blah, blah. And when I would leave, I would sort of feel that cloud lift the closer that I got home. And I thought, man, this place really has an effect on me. And I do think that's true. I think our physical locations do have an effect on us.
I agree.
Um,
Hmm.
so now I work from home. I set my own schedule, of course. Life is very different in the sense of I'm talking to clients all the time. I run a membership community, which I didn't a couple years ago.
Hmm.
So life is really different. I will say the one thing that I really do miss is going somewhere and being with people that I really like. I miss seeing my students. I miss seeing fellow teachers and colleagues.
Hmm.
So that's one thing I'm trying to figure out a way to integrate better into my life now, because I
Yeah.
work from home and my wife is always trying to kind of, shoo me out of the house.
Understandably,
Yeah,
we get that.
I totally
But
get it.
yeah, so I'm, and I don't expect you to go into details, but it sounds like financially speaking, things have worked out pretty well for you.
Yeah, I would say, gosh, let me think here. Um, so last year I multiplied my college salary by several times actually, which was
Hmm.
kind of a surprise to me. Um, now that's I would say two caveats to that. Number one is I made a really low salary, like as a college professor. Like, most of the time you go to like a university or something, and
Hmm.
salaries can be 60, 70, 80 grand for kind of a basic professor position. Not always, but
Hmm.
in many cases they are, or even more. So I tapped out at like 35 grand a year
Hmm.
plus benefits. And that was the most I ever made as a college professor. And
Hmm.
and you can only teach so many extra classes or take on so many extra responsibilities
Right.
and that kind of thing. And one of the things that really hit me was one day I went to a local convenience store, and what they were starting out as assistant managers was like 42,000 or something.
Hmm.
And I stood there, getting my Coke or whatever, and I was like, oh my gosh, like the people working at the convenience store are making 7 or 8 grand more than I am. And I've got a couple master's degrees and all this experience and blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And it was really kind of a wake up call. Not that the money part is everything,
No.
of course, but it does help, you know,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
helps in a lot of different ways.
And I'm grateful that your idea to do this, to kind of pursue something that really fit with your talent and your drive, has also had financial benefit on your household because now you
Totally.
get to do even more of it. And so you've been writing books, you've been co-writing books, you've been ghostwriting books. Your newest book that you co-wrote with Billy Stanley. So again, I have it right here in my hand. The Faith of Elvis, story only a brother can tell. Super awesome book. Just came out just a few days ago. And I noticed that on Amazon that it is I've seen it chart in the number one position in two different categories now. So
We got
one
kicked
was,
off by Loretta Lynn at the
well,
review
Loretta
level,
Lynn, that's very
which
very
is totally
relevant
understandable.
subject. Yeah, understandably, she just passed away, so we'll allow that. But at the same time, I thought, all right, this is kind of neat. Did you ever think that this dream was going to result in you co-writing a book with Elvis Presley's brother? Was that
No,
something that you had in mind?
I had absolutely no idea. Really, I didn't. We were actually on a marketing call today, um, for the book. So the marketing team for Thomas Nelson, the publisher of this book,
Yeah, one of the major
and the
publishers.
yeah, and the PR people. So they've included me in all of the marketing stuff and all the meetings, which has been really cool because
Yep.
I have never been in that world before up until this project.
Right.
And they told me today. Now, of course, I'm not going to hold my breath, but they told me today, it's been doing really well in stores, and there's been a high demand for it and everything. So, a year ago, I would have thought that was crazy to be involved in something like this. But now are a couple caveats to that. One is that this was a very fast project. So normally a project like this would probably take 2 years,
Hmm.
but it was fast tracked for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
So we got it out really fast, and they had kind of a real push on it, so that was great. But it didn't just happen magically. It really happened because of relationships that I've been building for years.
Hmm.
Long before I had any inkling I was going to do ghostwriting, I've been doing podcasting. So I've
Hmm.
been doing podcasting since 2013. And all those relationships that I have, all those people I've interviewed and people I've connected with, all of those things have really played a huge role in being able to transition into ghostwriting and have
Hmm.
connections that have resulted in clients and referrals and those kinds of things. So the podcast has been a super important part of all this.
Yeah, well, let me use that as kind of a good segue into a platform question or two. Give us an overall picture of what platform elements you have in place, because many of us on the call here have a variety of things in place, although some
Mm-hmm.
of us on the call here are brand new, and some of us have been doing this for a while, but we want to add some things. So what would you say are the most productive elements of your platform as far as generating business or connecting with an audience? What's the most productive parts, and what elements in general do you have?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I look at it as there's two or three different things that are part of each element as I look at them. So for me, ghostwriting is great because it can generate a lot of income potentially. If you work
What
a
are we
writer,
talking about? What one project as a ghostwriter can earn you how much?
well, I'll give you the attorney answer. It can range from, at the low end. So I started out at 15,000. That was my
All right.
first project, which was high actually for your first project.
Mhm.
But I felt like I had the experience to justify that as a beginning ghostwriter. I had written books myself
Mhm.
also, so it wasn't like I was brand new to that.
Right. So 15 on the low end, and
Fif-
then
15, I mean, you can, like the high tier of ghostwriters are multiple six figures per project.
right.
So where I am right now is 50 to 75,000 per full length book project,
Mhm.
depending on the length of the book, the complexity, how many interviews are required, blah blah
Sure.
blah. Now that being said, there's always multiple factors that go into pricing and whatnot. So my
How
last
many
book was, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, how many of those are you looking to do per year
Uh,
realistically?
well, I've hired a couple writers this past year, which went really well, and I really loved that process. So part of the deal is that the more that I can charge, and obviously, you want the value that you're giving to be in accordance with what you're charging.
Right.
Obviously, you can't just raise your prices, for no good reason.
Right.
Um, Part of charging more per project is that I can hire some help with it.
Mhm.
So if it's a book that's more research driven, for example, I can hire somebody to do the bulk of the research and a first draft of the book,
Mhm.
which actually results in a much better project because what I'm giving to the client as a first draft is actually a second draft
Mhm.
because it's already been written as a first draft and I go over it and I do rewrites.
Mhm.
Then we give it to the client and it goes way faster. And for me, the coolest thing is that I can then help out somebody else's family,
Mhm.
which to me is that brings a depth of joy to be able to pay another writer that I
Oh, for
don't get
sure.
earning myself. Like to know
Right.
that I helped out somebody's family and that now I have an agency where I can hire people and really bless them. That to me is really what it's all about.
So 2 books a year like that, 3 books a year? What do you think?
So I could do probably 5 or 6 or 7, depending
5,
on
6,
what
or
kind of books they
7
were.
between 50 and 75 grand times
Potentially,
5,
yes.
6, or 7.
Yeah.
That seems okay, from 35,000 a year to the type of income that allows you to employ an entire team plus take care of your family better than you ever were before. I'd say that's
Yes.
all right. You
Yes.
are
Now, go
this is
ahead.
no way. I'm going to interrupt you because you are one of the most understated people that I know. And those of you live on the call, do you notice this? Like he's doing this stuff at a really high level, and he's like, "But there's the downside." We don't care about the downside. We just want to hear about the upside. I don't even care about the downside. You're doing great stuff, and I love hearing your story because I know that there are people on this call right now that are looking to make that kind of bold change. And I know that there are people listening to this podcast that would listen to your story with fascination and say, you know what? Like Kent is a regular guy like me. And he's somebody that was able to figure something out. He went from a spot that he was feeling kind of down and discouraged. And now all of a sudden, here he is co-writing a book with a well-known name about well-known subjects, getting all these different jobs, getting employing other people. 5 years ago, you were, or somewhere in that range, you were paying Amazon to destroy your books. And here
Yeah.
you are being paid by Amazon because they can't keep your books in stock. It's kind of a cool turnaround.
It is. I feel really, really blessed. And obviously, God has something to do with this. At least that's my perspective. And
Absolutely. I will amen that, as will, I'm sure, most of
yeah,
our people here.
it's interesting. So I also want to share this, and there was something else I wanted to share too. I forget what it was, but anyway. So I've tried to pay attention to my emotions, especially with the release of this Elvis book, because it's by far the biggest thing I've ever been involved in terms
Okay.
of publicity and that kind of stuff. And so I really wanted to pay attention to what it felt like to go into a bookstore and see my book in there. Now, John, you know what that's like. You've had that experience. Here's what was really surprising to me. Now, this is just my experience, and I don't say I'm not assuming this is everybody's experience, but my own experience was that it was really, really underwhelming. And let me explain what I mean by that, though. A lot of authors, like your whole life, you think, man, if I could just have a book with a traditional publisher, or if I could just be in a bookstore, that is like the pinnacle of success as an author. And so literally I went into Barnes and Noble just down the street the Friday before the book came out because they already had some in stock. I called up there, they put it back, and so I go up there to the counter, and the lady hands me the hardback book, and I looked at it for like 2 seconds. I was like, "That's cool," to see it in a hardback, and then I checked out. And then I went back on Tuesday to see it on the shelf in several different Barnes and Nobles. Here's what to me was so interesting about at least my own experience was that it was not really a feeling of, oh, I've arrived, or oh, I'm so great, or I've achieved this or that. For me, it was a feeling of, now I have more responsibility. It
Mm,
really felt like a promotion, in the sense of, when you get a promotion, you kind of get enamored with the title for a minute, and you think, oh, now I'm the vice president of this, or I'm the president of this or that, or whatever it is.
mm,
But really, then you turn around and go, oh, getting a promotion actually means I have more responsibility, and
mm,
I have to step up my game. To me, that's what this has felt like. It's like, oh, now that I have this thing I can put on my resume, now I really have to kind of live up to that. I have a
mhm,
responsibility to Billy Stanley, and to the legacy of Elvis, and
mhm.
to the publisher, and to the readers, to continue to step up my game. So that was really a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting that emotion, but it was a really good emotion, because I think when you're kind of enamored with your own success, that to me is really uninteresting. For 2 seconds, it's cool, but then it's like, oh, now I really kind of have to step up what I'm doing, and accept responsibility that now I've reached this thing, and I have to really live up to it.
Kent Sanders, why are you so mature? Why are you such a grown up?
I have I don't have the least idea, because if you could see me doing my dance moves at home and see how I embarrass the heck out of my teenage son, you would think uh, he's like 5.
I look at this and I think, you know what? This is what needs to happen. Some of us on the call here need to follow Kent Sanders into the next Barnes and Noble that he goes into, and we need to either have a kazoo or a trumpet or something like that, and tell people, please part the aisles, because the co-author of The Faith of Elvis has just walked into the building. And then when you walk out, I want to be the one that says Kent Sanders has just left the building, right?
I have to
In
say,
true Elvis
what's
fashion.
actually way more interesting to me when I go into a Barnes and Noble is I always look for friends of mine who have books on Barnes and Noble. So John, I always look for your book
Awesome.
and the card set that goes with it. There's several other people. I look for Dan Miller's books. I look for other people, Bob Berg,
Yep.
people that I know, and I always go in there and I play this little game where if their books are not front facing, I take them off the shelf and I front face them. Now that's bad for whoever's book is front facing. According to their planner, they're supposed to have those front facing books out. But I'm like, well, I don't feel too bad for them. I know this guy, so I'm going to put their book front facing out.
Nice.
It's just a
You
fun little
probably
game
helped
that
me
I
sell
play.
a
It's
few
kind of silly.
copies. I appreciate that. I'm going to do that for you now. So that's going to be, I'm going to return the favor. All right. Real quick here, before we segue into our members only Q&A. I started to ask this question, but then you said something that got me down a trail of asking some other
Yeah, sorry
questions.
I interrupted you.
But the just real quick bullet points, what platform elements do you have in place?
So I have the ghostwriting element, but then
Okay.
the the downside of ghostwriting, like any client work, is that you only get paid when you do the work.
Right.
Like somebody I forget earlier on the call was saying, I forget who that was, but that's such a great point because it doesn't matter how much you can get paid for work. If the work stops, then you don't get paid for it.
Right. So you have a
So I've
service
always been
element through
yeah, I've always
ghostwriting.
been hyper aware of that.
Okay.
So that's why I've been developing other things on the side, like my Daily Writer Club, which is
Right.
very similar to Platform Launchers in the way that we run it, and we do a weekly
Give
call
a
and so
plug for
forth.
the website. Tell people where they can find it.
Sure, it's dailywriterlife.com.
dailywriterlife.com.
Mm-hmm.
So be sure to follow up with that. All right. So you got your membership community. What else you have?
So membership community, I do my own books, of course. So
Okay.
that's an income source.
Right.
I also do a daily podcast, just like you do, John. Of course, you
Yep.
do several podcasts, and I'm still not sure how you really keep up with those, but I'm convinced you have a twin somewhere that's
That's
slaving away in a basement.
it's actually true. Yeah, I'll tell you about it off mic.
Okay, that'll be my you've got a clone somewhere
I
working
do.
the
Yeah,
podcast.
absolutely.
So I've got the podcast now. My podcast is not it's not large, but actually today I just got my first podcast sponsor.
Nice.
This is not a paid sponsorship; it's an affiliate kind of a deal that I'm working with somebody.
Still
So
fantastic.
podcast is something I'm growing. So month over month, it's growing. My
Okay.
membership's growing. I've got my own books. And what else do I have? I'll be coming out with some courses and other kinds of things, some products related to the Daily Writer. In
Nice.
fact, for my retreat next week, I just ordered some swag with that word just sounds weird to me when I say swag, but people
Stuff
say
we
it, so
all
I'm going to
get.
say it. Some, mugs and pens and
So
apparel and stuff like
merch.
that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
some
and
merch, some
even
some things that I can sell.
yeah, and even just the fact of live events, that can
Oh yeah,
be
live events.
part of your
True. Forgot
recipe,
about that.
like hosting live events. That's certainly a big part of a platform.
And I'm getting ready to launch a mastermind as well pretty soon.
Love it.
So that'll be
Love it.
another potential income source. I'm probably forgetting something, but I
But
can't remember
still,
what it is. So
what's that, like 6, 7 different things? Plus you employ several different people. Kent Sanders, you, sir, are a success.
well,
And
thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm super grateful that I get to call you my friend, and you're somebody I have a lot of respect for, and I've been observing your life, and I'm grateful that I got to know you at the season of life that I did because there's a lot of things that you said, all right, this was a low season, this was a low season. Well, in the season that I've known you, I've been able to see so many of these big wins and so many of these things that the Lord has chosen to bless you with, and it's been really edifying to be
Hmm.
able to watch it all.
Thank
And
you.
I'm just excited and just want to celebrate that with you. And I know our group is super excited about it. I'm going to let our listeners know in just a second, we're about to segue into a Q&A that we do with our members club. They're here on the call with myself and with Kent, and we're going to let them, I know they're chomping at the bit to be able to ask Kent some follow-up questions about ghostwriting, about his overall platform, all sorts of things like that. But I want to invite you, if you're listening to us on the podcast or if you're watching via video, stop by platformlaunchers.com. You could take a 2-week test drive of all the things that we have in our training vault and everything with platform launchers, see if it's a good fit for you. And one of the things you will be able to access in that 2-week test drive is the full 60-minute video of this call, including the Q&A session that we're about to have with Kent Sanders. So if his story is of interest to you, again, just stop by platformlaunchers.com and sign up for the 2-week test drive, and you can check it out and watch the whole thing. And I hope it's edifying and encouraging, and you get to see what an awesome guy he is. But again, dailywriterlife.com is also Kent's website. We hope you'll check it out, and be sure to check out the book, The Faith of Elvis, a story only a brother can tell, that Kent wrote with Elvis Presley's stepbrother, Billy Stanley. It just came out. It's a fantastic book, and I hope you love it. Kent, are you ready for our members-only Q&A?
Let's do it. Let's roll.
All right. So those of you listening via the podcast or watching via YouTube, we're going to say goodbye to you right now, but we hope to catch you in the members club area. Again, be sure to stop by platformlaunchers.com and take your test drive today. We'll catch you next time.